Dahlia.
You already signed my goodbye for me. Why are you asking me to stay now?
If you walk out now, you don't understand what you're doing.
No. You never understood what I built.
$40 million? Whose money were you trying to give my daughter?
By the time I turned away from my husband's wedding, the bride was still holding his arm, and $40 million had just disappeared from his future. Not spent. Not stolen. Frozen. The private banking screen beside the ceremonial table flashed red, while nearly 200 guests stared at the same 3 words. Signature verification failed. Dong-Hyun stood beneath a wall of white roses in his black wedding suit, one hand stretched toward me as if he could stop what was happening simply by telling me not to leave. Beside him, Cha Yo-jin was still wearing her veil. Her new wedding ring had been on her finger for less than 20 minutes. Between us, on the polished table, lay the divorce agreement that had made their marriage possible. My name was on the last page, my signature was underneath it, and I had never touched the pen. Dahlia! Dong-Hyun said my name the way he used to say it when we were alone. Softly, possessively, like I still belonged to him. I looked at the document once more, then at the man who had forged my freedom so he could marry another woman. You already signed my goodbye for me, I said. Why are you asking me to stay now? The ballroom went completely still. Men who had spent years lowering their voices when Song Dong-Hyun entered a room were suddenly watching him like they had never seen him before. His mother stood near the front row, pale with fury. Chairman Cha stared at the frozen transfer notice as though someone had slapped him in front of his entire family. And Yo-jin? She slowly released my husband's arm. Dong-Hun stepped toward me. I stepped back, not because I was frightened of him, because for the first time in 6 years, there was nothing left in that room I wanted. If you walk out now, he said quietly, you don't understand what you're doing. I almost smiled. That was the problem with powerful men. They spent so much time convincing everyone else they knew everything that eventually they started believing it themselves. No, I told him, you never understood what I built. Then I turned around. The same security men who once searched my handbag before allowing me into Song family meetings moved aside without being asked. Nobody stopped me. Behind me, someone shouted about the bank. Someone else demanded to know why the transfer had been frozen. Then Chairman Chair's voice cut through the ballroom. $40 million? I kept walking. Whose money were you trying to give my daughter? That was when the wedding finally began to fall apart. If you enjoy stories where an underestimated woman doesn't need revenge handed to her because she already built the power to protect herself, subscribe. Because 6 months before that wedding, I still believed my husband was the safest man in my life. My name is Dahlia Ferris. Before I became Song Dong-Hyun's wife, before people whispered about me in Seoul ballrooms and Manhattan private clubs, before black cars waited outside restaurants because my husband never traveled without men watching the doors, I was a 26-year-old woman working out of one rented room above a laundromat in Baltimore. I had a second-hand desk, a business loan I almost didn't qualify for, 1 employee, and a fountain pen my grandmother gave me on the morning I signed the lease. Grandma Willa had raised me after my mother died. She cleaned office buildings at night for 30 years, took buses everywhere, grew tomatoes in old coffee cans, and understood money better than most bankers I eventually met. When she handed me that pen, she gave me 2 rules. Sign only what you believe in. Then she tapped the paper and read it twice before you do. I laughed. She didn't. My mother had lost a grocery store because she trusted the wrong man with paperwork. His name was Otis. He smiled well, dressed better, and handled the books while my mother handled everything else. Supplier agreements, lease renewals, bank forms. My mother believed she had a partner. What she actually had was a man slowly learning how to imitate her signature. By the time she realized documents had been executed in her name without her knowledge, the store was drowning. I was 15 when I watched her sit at our kitchen table, comparing 2 signatures that looked almost identical. One was hers, one wasn't. That night changed the direction of my life. I studied finance. Then risk. Then corporate law until I understood enough of it to know when I needed somebody smarter than me in the room. Ferris Capital Group grew because I learned early that trust was valuable. Verification was safer. By 30, I had offices in 3 cities. By 31, I was managing more money than the bank that once refused me my first business loan. And then I met Song Dong-hyun. People in America called him a shipping executive. People in Seoul called him much more carefully. The Song family owned hotels, freight terminals, private clubs, logistics companies, and enough commercial real estate to make newspapers call them an old money conglomerate. That was the respectable version. The version whispered behind closed doors was simpler. The Songs controlled doors other people needed opened. Ports, security, private negotiations, debts powerful men preferred never to discuss publicly. Dong-hyun was the eldest son and the man his father trusted to settle problems without creating headlines. I never saw him threaten anyone. He rarely had to. Men twice his age stood when he entered private rooms. Club owners closed entire floors when he wanted dinner. Cars appeared before he asked for them. And the quiet men in black suits who followed him everywhere never needed instructions repeated. I should have been intimidated. Instead, the first time we met, he irritated me. We were at a cross-border investment conference in New York. I had just finished speaking on a panel when he approached me holding 2 terrible cups of hotel coffee. "You disagreed with me," he said. I looked at him. "I don't remember speaking to you." "You disagreed with a position my company published last quarter." "Oh." I took the coffee. "I disagreed with it because it was wrong." He stared at me for 2 seconds. Then he laughed. Nobody around him did. That interested me. He asked me about risk models. I asked why Song International kept acquiring hotels with failing labor structures. He asked if I always spoke to men like that. I told him only the ones who asked questions they weren't prepared to hear answered. He didn't ask me to dinner that night. He asked me to breakfast the next morning so I could explain why his acquisition strategy was flawed. Somehow, that worked on me. Dong-hyun never courted me with the things other wealthy men used. No watches, no designer bags, no ridiculous flowers delivered to my office. He paid attention instead. He knew I drank coffee black. He learned that I called Grandma every Sunday at 6. He noticed I went silent before important negotiations. Once, when a delayed flight made me miss Grandma's birthday dinner, he put me on one of the Song family planes without telling me until we were already driving toward the airport. "You cannot solve every problem with a private jet," I told him. "No," he said, "but I can solve this one." That was Dong-hyun before his family taught him loving me and choosing me were 2 different things. For 2 years, he made me feel like I was the one person in his life he never needed to perform around. When his mother introduced him to daughters from other powerful Korean families, he refused every arrangement. When one of his uncles told him marrying me would complicate succession, Dong-hyun left the dinner. When a Song family advisor referred to me as temporary, Dong-hyun removed him from the American division the following morning. That was the man I married. And that was why what came later hurt more than if he had been cruel from the beginning. Our wedding was small by Song standards. Only 80 guests. Grandma Willa walked me down the aisle wearing flat shoes because her knees hurt too much for heels. Halfway down, she tightened her hand around my arm. "Don't let anybody make you small in this family," she whispered. I smiled. "Grandma." "I mean it." She glanced toward Dong-hyun. Not even him. For the first 4 years, I thought she had worried for nothing. Dong-hyun and I were good together. Not easy. Good. There is a difference. He had been raised to command. I had built my life refusing to be commanded. We argued. We negotiated. Sometimes we went to bed angry and woke up still angry. But we respected each other. Or I believed we did. Heiress Capital began managing the Song family's American hospitality holdings. I restructured failing properties, separated dangerous liabilities, renegotiated financing, built holding companies designed to protect their legitimate investments from the instability surrounding the rest of the Song empire. Dong-hyun gave me unusual authority because, in his words, I was the only person he trusted more than himself. The mansion we lived in sat outside New York on land purchased through one of those structures. At the time, it made financial sense. I never imagined the paperwork would matter to my marriage. The first crack appeared at a hotel closing dinner. I had spent 4 months rescuing the acquisition, 80-hour weeks, dozens of negotiations, one lawsuit avoided by less than 48 hours. At dinner, one partner raised his glass. To Dong-hyun. Brilliant restructuring. Another man congratulated him. Then another. I waited. My husband smiled. Thank you. That was all. On the drive home, I stared through the window for 15 minutes before speaking. You didn't correct them. He loosened his tie. About what? The restructuring. He looked genuinely confused. Then he understood. Dahlia, I did that work. I know. They don't. He sighed. They respect you. That isn't the point. It costs you nothing if they think I led it. I looked at him. And what does it give you? He turned toward the window. Stability. That answer bothered me more than I admitted. Not because he took credit once, because he had decided something belonging to me could become his if taking it made his position easier. I let the argument die. That became my mistake. Small disrespect rarely stays small when it is rewarded with silence. His mother, Madame Wumi's son, noticed the change before I did. She had never approved of me. She was simply too disciplined to say it plainly. At our engagement dinner, she looked at Grandma Willa's gold watch and asked whether I wanted something more appropriate. At Thanksgiving, she arrived 3 hours early with her staff and replaced every dish I had planned. At family dinners, she corrected my Korean loudly enough for staff to hear. Every insult came wrapped in manners. Then the Cha family entered the picture. For 20 years, the Songs and Chas had competed across ports, hotels, and private clubs from Seoul to Singapore. Nobody called it a war in public. They called it competition. The men surrounding both families knew better. Chairman Cha had one daughter, Yo Jin. Educated, beautiful, controlled, and positioned to inherit more influence than most men in her family. A Song-Cha marriage would end years of hostility and create an alliance powerful enough to make every smaller family around them choose a side. Madame Wu wanted it. Dong-hyun's council wanted it. And apparently, eventually, my husband wanted it enough to erase me. The first financial warning arrived in March. My compliance director, Callista Reyes, walked into my office holding a tablet. Tell me you authorize this. $11 million. Joint hospitality account. Transfer request. My signature attached. Destination linked to a Song-controlled account in Seoul. I checked the timestamp. 4:12 in the morning. Dong-hyun had told me he was sleeping in Chicago that night. Freeze it. Callista studied my face. Do you want me to call him? No. That surprised her. It surprised me too. But something old woke up inside me. I saw my mother at that kitchen table. 2 signatures. Almost identical. 1 lie. Don't ask anyone anything yet, I said. Callista nodded. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I want to know whether this was a mistake before the person responsible knows I noticed. That week, I quietly activated a security protocol Heiress Capital had developed years earlier. Any transfer above $50,000 involving one of my protected holding accounts would require live signature verification. Not merely an electronic signature. Not a scanned document. Pressure. Stroke sequence. Timing. The habits nobody could reproduce from a photograph. I never told Dong-hyun. Then I watched him. He started traveling more. Seoul. Busan. Tokyo. Back to Seoul. His calls became shorter. His security detail changed. Men I had known for years were replaced by younger guards who looked at me as if they had already been instructed where my place was. At home, Dong-hyun still slept beside me. That was the cruelest part. He would return from meetings about my replacement and climb into our bed. Some nights he wrapped an arm around my waist as though nothing was happening. Once I woke at 2 in the morning and found him staring at me. What? I whispered. Nothing. You're staring. I'm allowed to look at my wife. The word wife nearly broke me. I didn't know yet how literally he had already decided it no longer applied. A gilded invitation arrived the following month. Mr. Song, Dong-hyun and guest. Not Mr. and Mrs. Song. Not Dahlia Heiress. Guest. It was for a Song-Cha gala. My assistant Ori read the envelope twice. Do you want me to call them? No. Dahlia. I said no. By then, silence was no longer avoidance. It was strategy. The gala was held in the Song family ballroom. I wore emerald green because Dong-hyun once told me it reminded him of the garden where we married. I wanted to know whether seeing it would make him remember himself. Cha Yo-jin wore white. Not bridal white. Close enough. Dong-hyun saw me enter. His eyes stayed on me several seconds too long. Then his mother touched his arm, and he turned back to Yo-jin. That told me more than any confession could have. At dinner, I was seated 2 places away from my husband. Yo-jin sat beside him. When I reached for the seating chart, Madame Wu placed her hand over it. "Business, dear." I stared at her hand, then at her. "Remove it." Her smile tightened. Dong-hun heard me. "Dahlia." That tone. The one asking me to cooperate. To make his life easier. I removed my hand from the chart. Not because Madame Wu had won. Because suddenly I didn't need to see anything else. I went home alone. Dong-hun returned after midnight. I was sitting in the dark living room when he entered. He stopped. "You waited up." "No." He removed his coat. "What happened tonight? I almost laughed." "You tell me." His jaw tightened. Yo-jin's family is important. To your company? To everything. And I'm not? He crossed the room. "You know that isn't what I mean." "Then tell me what you mean." He reached for my hand. I moved it. Something flashed across his face. Not anger. Fear. It disappeared quickly. "Dahlia, whatever happens with the Cha family, it doesn't change what you and I are." There it was. The first glimpse of the logic that would destroy us. I looked at him carefully. "What exactly do you think you and I are?" "My family." I waited. He said nothing else. 3 days later, an old hotel client called me. I asked casually whether she had heard anything about the Song-cha negotiations. She laughed. "Negotiations?" "Dahlia, people are calling it an engagement." My stomach went cold. "How long?" "A month, maybe longer." I thanked her, hung up, then called Callista. "Pull every document filed under my name for the last 6 months." She stopped typing. "Everything?" "Everything." 6 days later, she walked into my office with a forensic document examiner. Whitfield Cole placed 3 signatures in front of me. 1 from a mortgage, 1 from an old shareholder agreement, 1 from a divorce decree. I didn't understand what I was looking at for several seconds. Then I saw my name. Petitioner. Dahlia Ferris Song. Divorce finalized 6 weeks earlier. My signature on the final page. My hands went completely still. Whitfield pointed toward the capital D. "Your genuine signature closes this loop counterclockwise." He moved his finger. "This one closes clockwise." I stared at the paper. "You're telling me this isn't mine. I'm telling you someone studied your signature carefully." Callista sat beside me. "Dahlia." I couldn't hear her properly. 6 weeks. For 6 weeks, I had been setting dinner across from a man who had legally represented to a court that I wanted our marriage dissolved. For 6 weeks, he had called me from hotel rooms, slept beside me, kissed my forehead, asked whether Grandma needed anything. And somewhere in the world, according to a piece of paper, I was no longer his wife. Callista slid another file toward me. "There's more. 3 attempted transfers. 11 million. 8 million. Then 21 million. 40 million total. All requiring my authorization. All carrying versions of my signature. All connected to preparations for the Cha alliance." The room blurred for half a second. Then became painfully clear. Does he know they failed? The first 3 were held internally. "We haven't notified the requesting party why." I looked at her. "And if he tries again? Your live verification protocol will reject it immediately." I closed the file. For the first time since I met Song Dong-hyun, I understood something before he did. He believed he had already taken everything he needed from me. He had no idea the trap wasn't waiting in a courtroom. It was waiting inside the empire I had built for him. What would you have done at that point? Confronted him immediately, or stayed quiet until you knew how deep the betrayal went? I already knew my answer. I confronted him that night. The forged divorce decree sat between us on the desk in his study. Dong-hun looked at it, then at me. He didn't pretend. That somehow hurt worse. "You forged my signature." His eyes closed briefly. "The family handled the filing." "You knew?" "Yes." No excuse. No hesitation. Just yes. I felt something inside me go still. "How long, Dahlia? How long have you known I was supposedly divorced?" 6 weeks. I laughed once. Not because anything was funny. You slept beside me last night. His jaw tightened. I didn't stop loving you. That sentence stunned me more than the confession. You divorced me without my consent. The charm marriage is strategic. And what am I? He came around the desk. I stepped backward. He stopped immediately. You are not part of that. Answer me. His voice dropped. You're my home. I stared at him. For one ridiculous second, I wondered whether heartbreak could actually make someone faint. Yo-Jin was the alliance. I was home. He genuinely believed that explanation helped him. You forged my name so you could buy an alliance and keep me privately. I was trying to protect both sides of my life. I am not a side of your life. Dahlia, I am your wife. He flinched. I pointed to the decree. Or I was until you decided my consent was inconvenient. His composure cracked. The council would never accept you as part of succession. I never asked them to. My mother, I didn't marry your mother. You married into my world. No, I married you. That silenced him. Then Madame Wu appeared in the doorway. She had been listening. Of course she had. You are making this emotional, she said. I turned slowly. My husband forged my signature on a divorce. The marriage had become unsuitable. For whom? The family. I looked at Dong-hyun. He said nothing. His mother continued. The charm marriage protects decades of work. You will be compensated generously. She placed a settlement folder on the desk. I opened it. Money, property, confidentiality. A clause removing Ferris Capital from management of Song's American assets. They didn't merely want my marriage. They wanted the infrastructure I had spent 4 years building. Then I understood the 40 million. It wasn't just a wedding gift. The Songs were trying to pull assets out before removing me from the structure entirely. Madame Wu mistook my silence for shock. You will retain more money than most women could spend in a lifetime. I looked at her. You still think this is about money? What else could it possibly be? My name. She blinked. My work. I closed the folder. My consent. Dong-hyun moved toward me. Dahlia, don't turn this into a war. I looked directly at him. I didn't. Then I pushed the forged decree toward him. You started one using my signature. I left the study. Dong-hyun followed me into the hallway. Where are you going? To Grandma's. I'll have security drive you. No. You shouldn't travel alone tonight. I turned. Even then, after everything, he still sounded like my husband. Protective. Controlling. Terrified of losing proximity to me. I don't need your men. You're still under my protection. I stared at him. You divorced me. His face changed. On paper. That was when I knew there was no version of this marriage left to save. Because somewhere inside Dong-hyun, he truly believed paper could erase me when it benefited him and become meaningless when it didn't. I packed one suitcase. He stood in the bedroom doorway watching. He didn't touch me. Didn't stop me. But when I removed my wedding ring, his entire body stiffened. Don't. One word. The first desperate thing he had said all night. I placed the ring on the dresser. You already did. I drove to Grandma Willa's house myself. She was awake. She took one look at my suitcase and unlocked the door wider. No questions. No speeches. Just coffee. I sat at the same kitchen table where I had watched my mother compare forged signatures years earlier. Grandma placed her hand over mine. He hurt you. Yes. Did he take what you built? I looked at her. He thinks he did. Grandma nodded once, then let him keep thinking. That was exactly what I did. Callista and I worked quietly, not to destroy Song International. I didn't want what wasn't mine. I wanted a clean line drawn around everything that was. The American hotel structures, the property companies, the investment vehicles, the mansion, the protected capital accounts. Dong-hyun had always spoken about those assets as Song property because the Song family benefited from them. But benefiting from something and owning it are not the same. Ferris Capital had designed the structure. Ferris entities held controlling rights over several assets. The mansion stood on land owned by one of my subsidiaries. Some hotel investments were management partnerships that could terminate if the Song side committed fraud. Dong-hyun had signed those agreements years earlier, without reading them closely. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't cost me a marriage. Meanwhile, his wedding preparations accelerated. Invitations circulated. Photos appeared in society publications. The Song and Cha families announced a union that would create a new era of cooperation. My name vanished from their public history with astonishing speed. Madame Wu had staff remove my wedding portrait from the main hall. She replaced it with a formal photograph of Dong Hyun and Yo Jin. Ori sent me a picture. I stared at it for less than 10 seconds, then deleted it. Dong Hyun called every night for the first week. I answered none of them. He sent messages that moved slowly from command to explanation. Come home. We need to talk. You don't understand the pressure I was under. I can fix this. Nothing between us has changed. That last one made me angry enough to finally respond. Everything changed when you decided I didn't need to be present for my own divorce. He called immediately. I turned the phone off. Then Yo Jin tried to contact me. The first message never reached me. Neither did the second. I found out later Madame Wu had intercepted both through a Song family assistant. 3 days before the wedding, Yo Jin finally called Heiress Capital directly. Ori transferred her to me. There was silence when I answered. Then she said, I think there's something nobody is telling me. I leaned back in my chair. What have they told you? That your divorce was mutual. I almost laughed. It wasn't. Silence. Did you sign it? No. I heard her inhale. Dahlia. My signature was forged. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she asked the question I had been waiting for. Does Dong Hyun know? Yes. When Yo Jin spoke again, her voice had changed. Why hasn't your attorney stopped the wedding? My attorney challenged the decree the day I found it. What? The court process doesn't move at the speed your wedding planner does. Another silence. Then I added, and stopping your wedding isn't my objective. What is? Stopping them from taking what they believe the divorce gives them access to. She understood. Yo Jin was not stupid. What are they moving? I don't know what they told your father. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. 40 million? I asked. Her breathing changed. They called it a marriage capitalization. It's coming out of accounts they don't control. Oh my God. I tried to tell you because you deserve to know what you're marrying into. She laughed bitterly. I thought I knew exactly what I was marrying into. So did I. Yo Jin asked me whether she should cancel. I told her something she did not expect. That is your decision. You don't hate me? I don't know you well enough to hate you. He's leaving you for me. No. My voice surprised even me with how calm it sounded. He erased me for power. You happen to be the power he chose. She said nothing. I thought she would cancel. She didn't. Years later, I understood why. The Cha family was not built around daughters making last-minute public decisions either. Yo Jin confronted her father. Her father told her the marriage would proceed. She confronted Dong Hyun. He told her the financial problem was temporary. She asked him whether he forged my signature. According to what she later told me, he said, the divorce was necessary. Not no. Necessary. She still walked down the aisle, and I decided to attend. Not the vows. Those belonged to them. I arrived 20 minutes later when the ceremonial family contracts were being signed and Chairman Cha expected confirmation of the $40 million transfer promised as part of the union. I wore ivory, not a bridal gown. A fitted silk dress I had purchased years earlier after Heiress Capital closed its first $100 million portfolio. I wore Grandma Willa's watch, and I carried nothing except the original forensic report. The doors opened. Every face turned. Dong Hyun saw me first. The expression on his face almost stopped me. Not anger. Relief. For 1 second, surrounded by flowers from his wedding to another woman, my former husband looked relieved that I had come back. Then he saw Callista behind me. The relief disappeared. Dahlia. Yo Jin turned. She was beautiful. She also looked terrified. Madame Wu stepped toward me. This is inappropriate. I kept walking. No, forging my signature was inappropriate. Whispers broke across the room. Dong Hyun descended from the platform. Not here. I looked around. 200 witnesses, Song elders, Cha elders, business partners, men from private clubs where decisions were made without minutes or records, men who had spent years treating my husband like his name alone was collateral. Here is perfect. Callista placed the divorce decree on the contract table. Beside it, she placed Whitfield Cole's report. Dong Hyun stared at them. What are you doing? Giving your new family the paperwork your old family forgot to show them? Chairman Cha stepped closer. What is this? Yojin answered before anyone else could. Her signature was forged. The room changed. You could feel it. Madame Wu looked at her sharply. Yojin, wasn't it? Donghyun's eyes stayed on me. Dahlia, we can discuss this privately. We did. I nodded toward the document. You chose this publicly. At that exact moment, a banker standing beside Chairman Cha cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable. Mr. Song. Donghyun turned. There is an issue with the capitalization transfer. Madame Wu froze. What issue? The banker turned the tablet around. Red screen. Signature verification failed. My pulse didn't even change. Donghyun's did. I watched it in his throat. What does that mean? Chairman Cha demanded. The banker hesitated. The authorization attached to the transfer failed live verification. Chairman Cha looked at me. Then the divorce decree. Then Donghyun. How much? Nobody answered. His voice rose. How much money were you attempting to transfer? 40 million, I said. Every head turned toward me. Chairman Cha stared. I continued. From a Ferris Capital protected holding account. Madame Wu stepped forward. That account contains Song family assets. It contains assets managed through structures your son signed years ago. You cannot freeze our money. I didn't. I pointed toward the screen. The system did. Donghyun looked at me then. Really looked. And I saw the moment he remembered. Years before our marriage, I had told him the story about my mother's grocery store. I had told him why I studied signatures, why Ferris Capital never relied on scanned authorization for protected transfers. He had listened. Or I thought he had. Now the memory arrived too late. You built this, he whispered. Yes. His eyes moved toward the tablet, the verification system. Yes. How long have you known? Long enough. Something close to disbelief crossed his face. Not because I had outsmarted him. Because he had forgotten the woman standing in front of him was the same woman he once admired for being impossible to fool. Chairman Cha grabbed the transfer documents. You told me this was Song-controlled capital. Madame Wu spoke quickly. It is. No, Callista said. It isn't. Chairman Cha looked at Donghyun. My daughter married you 20 minutes ago. Donghyun remained silent. You promised 40 million in protected capital. Silence. And now I discover the transfer carries the forged authorization of the woman you secretly divorced? Yojin took one step away from her husband. Donghyun finally looked toward her. Yojin. She removed her hand from his arm. That was the moment captured in every face around us. The bride in white. The Korean Mafia heir reaching toward the wife he had erased. The forged divorce agreement on the table. And me turning away. Donghyun reached after me. Dahlia, wait. I stopped. Not because he asked. Because I wanted him to hear me clearly. You thought signing my name made what I built yours. His face tightened. It never did. Then I walked out. Behind me, the Song-Cha alliance began collapsing before the wedding flowers had time to wilt. Chairman Cha suspended every joint negotiation that afternoon. By evening, his attorneys were reviewing the marriage itself. Yojin left the ballroom separately from Donghyun. The 40 million remained frozen. And because the attempted transfer carried a disputed signature connected to an already challenged divorce decree, the bank escalated the matter immediately. That created a problem far larger than the money. The Songs had survived for decades because people believed they were controlled. Predictable. Dangerous when necessary, perhaps, but disciplined. Nobody wants to share ports, hotels, private clubs, or millions of dollars with a man who will forge his wife's signature because he cannot convince her to agree. Powerful men can forgive cruelty. They rarely forgive recklessness. Within 48 hours, members of Donghyun's own council were asking why American assets they believed belonged to the Song family were actually dependent on Ferris structures. The answer was embarrassing, because I had built them that way to protect the family. With Donghyun's approval. Years earlier. Before he started believing my intelligence was something he could use without continuing to respect the woman carrying it. One council member reportedly asked him whether he had read the agreements before signing. Donghyun didn't answer. That silence cost him almost as much as the forgery. 3 investors paused hotel developments. 2 lenders demanded reviews. A private club partner withdrew from a planned expansion. Nobody attacked the Song family. They simply stopped trusting Dong-hin. That was enough. The Chas formally withdrew from the alliance 6 days after the wedding. Yo-jin filed to end the marriage soon after. She called me once. I should have walked away before the ceremony. Maybe. You did. Eventually. She laughed quietly. I spent years thinking powerful women never hesitate. They do. I looked out my office window. They just learn not to build permanent decisions around temporary fear. We never became friends. But I respected her. She had been another piece on the board. The difference was, once she realized it, she stopped pretending otherwise. Madame Wu blamed everyone except herself. She blamed the bank, then Callista, then me, then Yo-jin. Finally, according to one of the song directors, she blamed Dong-hyun for not controlling his wife properly. That was when he turned on his mother. For the first time in his life, apparently. Too late to save us, but early enough to destroy what remained between them. You told me she would accept the settlement, he reportedly said. Madame Wu answered, You told me she loved you. He did not respond. I did love him. That had never been the weakness they thought it was. The weakness was his assumption that loving him meant I would accept anything required to keep him. The song board removed Dong-hun as head of American operations. He retained his family name, his personal wealth, his influence in Seoul. This was not a fairy tale where a powerful man became penniless overnight. It was worse for him than that. He remained powerful enough to understand exactly how much power he had lost. Heiress Capital terminated management relationships where fraud triggered contractual exit clauses. The mansion remained under my company's property structure. Several American hotel interests returned to independent management. Every dollar I had personally invested stayed protected. Every asset legally belonging to the Songs remained theirs. I took nothing from him. I simply stopped allowing him to call my work his. That distinction destroyed him. 3 months later, Dong-hun appeared at the mansion gate. No convoy, no council, one car. One driver who remained outside. I was sitting in Grandma Willa's old reading chair beside the window when security called. Mr. Song is here. I almost said send him away. Instead, I let him come to the porch, not inside. The last time I had seen him up close, he was wearing a wedding suit. Now he looked older, not dramatically, just enough. He stared past me into the house. Our wedding picture is gone. Yes. His eyes returned to mine. Yo-jin and I are ending the marriage. That isn't why you're here. No. Silence. Then he said, I was wrong. I waited. He almost smiled bitterly. You always hated apologies with explanations. I hate explanations pretending to be apologies. He nodded. I forged your name. The words seemed physically difficult for him. I let my mother convince me the family needed a marriage I didn't want. I convinced myself I could give them Yo-jin and still keep you. My stomach tightened, but I said nothing. I thought if you had money, the house, your company, you would eventually forgive the way it happened. You thought my consent had a price. Yes. At least he finally understood. He looked toward the driveway. I didn't realize what I was taking. I almost laughed. You took my marriage. No. He looked at me. I tried to take your right to choose me. That was the first thing he had said in months that sounded like the man I once loved. It still wasn't enough. You want to know the worst part? I asked. He nodded. If you had come to me and told me your family was demanding the Cha alliance, I would have fought beside you. His eyes closed. I know. No. You know now. I stepped closer. But back then, you looked at everything we built together and decided I was the easiest thing to sacrifice because you believed I would still be waiting when you were finished. His eyes were wet. Dong-hin was not a man who cried easily. I had seen him bury his father without tears, watched him sit through threats, hostile negotiations, and family funerals with the same unreadable face. But his voice broke when he said my name. Dahlia. I did not rescue him from the moment. Love does not require that. He took one slow breath. Is there anything left? I looked at the man I had once planned to grow old beside. There was grief in me. There probably always would be. but grief and permission are not the same. You didn't lose a wife when I walked out of that wedding. He waited. You lost access. His face changed. I continued. To my work, to my trust, to my home, to the woman who once believed you would never use power against her just because you could. He looked down. Those were never the same thing to you. This time he didn't argue. I think that was the moment he finally understood that regret is not always the beginning of reconciliation. Sometimes regret is simply the consequence you live with after the other person has healed enough to stop carrying it for you. Dong Hun left. I watched his car disappear down the drive. Then I went back inside. Grandma Willa was waiting in the kitchen. She had moved into the mansion temporarily after deciding my refrigerator contained rich people food and nothing worth eating. She looked toward the window. He gone? Yes. You taking him back? No. She nodded. Good. I laughed. That's all? She returned to cutting tomatoes. What do you want me to do? Write a speech? I sat beside her. After a moment, she looked at me. You loved him. I did. Probably still do somewhere. I said nothing. Grandma shrugged. Love isn't always instruction. That one stayed with me. A year later, Ferris Capital closed the largest hospitality deal in its history, twice the size of anything I had managed for Song International. I signed every page myself. Callista stood beside me. Ori filmed the final signature because he said someday I would appreciate having it. He was right. Grandma Willa's fountain pen moved across the last page. My capital D closed counterclockwise, exactly the way it always had. I started a fund for women rebuilding businesses after financial abuse by partners, spouses, or family members. Not because every woman needed a biometric signature system, because every woman deserved to know that protecting what she built was not the same as expecting betrayal. Sometimes protection is simply respect for your future self. The first woman we funded was 27. Her hands shook when she signed the lease for her first office. She looked at Grandma's pen. Does it get less scary? No. She laughed nervously. That wasn't very encouraging. I smiled. You become more prepared. Then I told her the 2 rules that had followed me from a laundromat office to a mafia wedding and back again. Sign only what you believe in. I tapped the contract. And read it twice before you do. She smiled. After she left, I stood alone by the window. For years, I had believed the worst thing Dong-hyun did was forge my signature. It wasn't. A signature is ink. A marriage is trust. He forged one because he had already convinced himself he could replace the other. That was the betrayal. But it was also his mistake, because the man who secretly divorced me believed my power came from being his wife. The song name, the mansion, the guards, the private rooms, the people who stood when he entered. None of it had built me. I had walked into his world already knowing how to build from nothing. He simply forgot. And when he married an heiress using a freedom I never gave him, then tried to finance his new life with assets protected by the woman he erased, my revenge wasn't destroying him. I didn't need to. I took back my name. I took back my work. I took back every door I had opened with my own hands. Then I closed the one he thought would always remain open. If you believe betrayal should have consequences and powerful love should never require a woman to surrender her dignity, subscribe to Mafia Heartbeat. Because sometimes the strongest ending isn't getting the man back. It's making sure he finally understands what he lost. Dong-hyun thought he could forge my signature, divorce me without my consent, marry an heiress, and keep everything I built. He was wrong. He didn't know. Now he does.